Hello, welcome back to the Notcast, episode 245 today. It is Wednesday, 2nd of November 2022. Sometimes I lose track of the days and the years and the months. I wrote 2002, one of my work emails earlier, which perhaps was a little bit surprising, stroke annoying. I had to catch myself and remember that I wasn't still in my 20s, and things have changed a lot since then. Today, I am going to be talking into my mobile phone about Depeche Mode's 12th studio album released on the 17th of April 2009, Sounds of the Universe, which was released in a super mega deluxe box set. I'm going to do an unboxing of this later, 13 years after everyone else did one. And it also came as a vinyl album. There were 48 live albums that released from the tour. There was the live DVD and Blu-ray, which was obligatory, of course, shot by Anton of Corbin, and a number of singles and a solo record, which I'm going to talk about as well. So without any further ado, enough of my yakking, let's boogie, as a Spinal Tap would have it. As I talk through every single one of the Depeche Mode records, there is the dreaded solo album, which we do have to address occasionally. I've never been a huge fan of some parts of Depeche's solo careers. The one of which I've probably been least interested in is the solo work of Dave Gahan. Not that it's bad, it's just not particularly good. His second studio album, Hourglass, released in 2007. And I always think of the Dave Gahan solo records as being kind of like Depeche Mode B-side compilations. You know, songs that weren't good enough to fit on the Depeche Mode albums. And bearing in mind that the writers for the Dave Gahan solo albums, Andrew Philpott, Christian Eigner, and Dave Gahan, certainly in the early years, are the same people that wrote the songs that Dave penned, which were on the Depeche Mode album. So, for example, let's say the sessions for this album, Hourglass, birthed 13, 14 songs, of which 3 almost definitely were then picked out by Depeche and selected to be used on the Depeche Mode LPs. So for Sounds of the Universe, those songs would have been, I think, Hold to Feed, I think it's Miles Away, and very probably something like Oh Well, which was a co-write with Martin Gore. So technically I'm kind of fibbing a little bit there, but let's not let facts get in the way of a good bit of polemic. There was the album was preceded with a single. The single is called Kingdom. Here's a couple of the CDs. I'm no doubt there was a 12-inch release or something. I was never so invested into the Dave Gahan solo stuff as to be that bothered about it. Now, on the DVD that comes with the album Hourglass, I think Richard Blade from K-Rock talks in depth about how Kingdom is a song that addresses the things which everyone asks at some point in their life. You know, I think the key chorus of Kingdom is there a kingdom behind it all? The idea of what happens after you die, and is there another universe or another world, a place where you can perhaps what happens after these ugly bags of mostly water change their cosmic address and move into something else. Kingdom is a good song. In fact, it would be a very good Depeche Mode LP track, but I don't think it's necessarily strong enough to stand up on its own, which is perhaps a little harsh, but I think perhaps Dave Gahan as a solo artist would not have had a huge and long solo career as a singer in his own right had he not had Depeche Mode in front or behind him at any point. It's fair to say. Sorry, Dave. I don't think your songwriting is particularly great. And what I will say about Kingdom itself is an absolutely fine song. Nothing either exceptional or terrible about it. But the Hourglass album, again, it does feel like Depeche Mode B-sides to which there are no A-sides. Kingdom is good. The track Saw Something is good, which is good because it was the second single released from the album. I think there's a song called Deeper and Deeper. That's pretty good as well. I listened to it recently. I don't remember much else, truth be told. I really don't. So sorry, it's mostly forgettable. The problem with this, and I think the problem with a number of solo albums by a number of artists, are that one part of the equation is quite good, That is, let's say it's the vocalist, the person that's in the band. The other half of the equation, the people they choose to work with, are sometimes chosen because of their personalities and not necessarily because of their skill set. So it's very easy to play guitar, even though I can't do it, or write music. What's difficult sometimes is writing music that sounds unique and individual. So there's something about, for example, David Gilmour or Alan Wilder or Karl Bartos, and you listen to them and you go, that's them. And you can hear the parts of them that exist inside the band framework as well. So the solos on, for example, something like Shine On You Crazy Diamond, the bouncy arpeggios that you have on the mixed version of Computer Love and the Robots and that type of thing. The way that Johnny Marr plays guitar inside the Smiths, you can hear that guitar tone in his solo work, in the stuff we did with the Modest Mouse. What you can hear inside the Dave Gahan solo album is a really good singer with a fair chunk of talent, but the musical backing that sits below him doesn't have enough individual personality and quirk to really excel. And this sounds very, very bitchy, but it genuinely isn't. I'm thinking there's a musician who worked with Brett Anderson, who wrote some of the music for some of the later solo albums. There's Tony Hoffer, for example, who was produced on this. There's a couple of other guys, and they're just, they do music for solo acts, and the music isn't amazing. So you kind of listen to it. It's competent, but it's dull. The music is lacking in personality, and whilst it's got structure and it's got chorus and vocals and beginning and intros and endings, you never listen to it, and immediately you hear the music and you go, it's that guy, it's him. I can tell it's him because of the quirk and personality in the music that comes out. It's somewhat anonymous, so a lot of the music that's on Hourglass is somewhat featureless almost, in so much as it lacks that certain individual quirky element of it. So as I've said before, the things that when you listen to Karl Bartos and David Gilmour, when you listen to somebody like Alan Wilder, you can hear what they're bringing into the band, and conversely, you can also hear what's missing when they're not in the band. It's lacking a degree of spikiness that's quirky and individual. So one of the things that we have on Depeche, for example, is that sense of the quirky. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's the quirky, weird, broken synth sounds, especially in the last 3 studio records, that you don't have on something like this. There is no sense when you're listening to Hourglass, for example, that particularly you're listening to the guy that was from Depeche Mode, just a very good singer. The album comes in a number of formats, by the way. So here's the CD and DVD edition. In the days when they would package DVDs with your album to make you buy it and not download it and bootleg it and stream it, they don't do that anymore. They've realised that approach doesn't necessarily bring extra sales in. Yes, what you've got 10 completely serviceable songs, of which I think probably 2 or 3 are really memorable and great, and 7 are pretty good, I guess, but they're not amazing. They're songs that you'd see on a 12-inch or something back in the 80s, and you go, oh, Depeche Mode had a song called Insoluble. Okay, I forgot that, for example. And then you'd come back and listen to it when you listen to your deluxe editions or your 12-inch singles box sets, and you go, well, that's quite good, but it's not amazing. So Hourglass, not a brilliant record, I'm afraid to say. It had 2 singles released from it. Obviously Kingdom. The other one is Saw Something, which was on this CD single. And it was backed with, and this is quite unusual, a remixes LP, which was only available on vinyl with the CD included inside it. So that's the only Dave Gahan solo thing I've got, and for some reason the CD isn't in there, but I'm sure I'll find it at some point. But it's not great, it's fair to say. It's just got remixes of Deeper and Deeper, Kingdom, Love Will Leave, Use You, and some extra ones that are on there. But no, not essential in my opinion at all. Things went quite quiet. Dave didn't tour for the Hourglass album. The band went into the studio and they announced their first single that was to be released from their upcoming 12th studio LP. The single is called Wrong, and this 12-inch is quite rare, I think. Here's a sealed copy of it, which actually, for some reason, although I bought it, I've never opened it. In fact, I've not. Oh, yeah, you can tell I've not taken that. I've not taken it even out of the packaging for a number of years. Wrong, I think, is an absolutely classic Depeche Mode track. Perhaps not necessarily the most obvious of singles to release from the album, but then, as I said before, apart from Precious, the first single from most of the Depeche albums has relied upon the fact that people will like it and buy it because it's Depeche Mode. Think about the premier singles from Songs of Faith and Devotion, which is I Feel You, which is very different. Barrel of a Gun from Ultra, Dream On from Exciter, and Wrong. These are all atypical. They're not releasing necessarily the most commercial of the songs as the first single because they're relying on an inbuilt inherent fan base. Now, there's a degree of arrogance about that. I don't always like that arrogance that goes with it, but it is there. It's real, and so that does exist as a very, very definite thing. And then, of course, you've got Wrong as 2 CD singles here. Mostly this one backed with a whole load of remixes. The Thin White Duke remix is particularly good, I'll put it that way. And on this one, it's backed with a Black Light Odyssey remix of a track called Oh Well. Oh Well appears on the deluxe edition of the LP. And I think Wrong is a great little Depeche Mode single. I'll kind of explain why. It's not necessarily a great single. It's a great Depeche Mode song, and there's a little bit of a difference between the two there. So, for example, what you've got is, although it was the last top 40 single in the UK that Depeche Mode released, there was also a thing that was happening around about the same time for artists like the Rolling Stones, U2 with Get On Your Boots, Pet Shop Boys with Love, etc. This was a period where bands that had been successful had started to age out of the pop charts. Now, you think if you were 18 when you bought Dreaming of Me in, let's say, 1980, you will have then been 48 when Wrong came out. You will have been at the point in your life where you're probably thinking, I'm not going to buy this single. I don't care enough about the music. I'll buy the album. I'll buy tickets to go and see them and dance to songs that I knew from half my life ago, but I won't necessarily listen to the records, and I certainly won't buy the new single. So this is the period where those three bands were starting to come to the end of their chart reign. U2, I think, haven't had a big top 40 UK single since Get On Your Boots, possibly since... No, actually, I know I'll go crazy if I go crazy tonight was the last top 40 UK single that U2 did have. Then we had Wrong, which was the last top 40 for Depeche Mode. Love, etc. was the last top 40 for Pet Shop Boys. I think New Order's last top 40 song was in 2005, for example. So these bands were starting to age out of the currency of youth, and trying to get in the charts is not necessarily an old man's game. So when you don't have hits, so what? You become almost by de facto, people start to look at you as a legacy act. If you haven't had a long period of time where you've been absent, broken, split up, arguing, people haven't missed you long enough to regard you as someone who's on the comeback. If you go back every 4 or 5 years, that's realistically, if you're 50 and a Depeche Mode fan, and next year that's what I will be, a 5-year gap is only 10% of your life. And those 5 years go very quickly when you're juggling it between, monthly pay packets, annual holiday leave entitlements, and school holidays. It goes super fast when you think about it. So that's so Wrong was the last of the top 40 hits for Depeche Mode, but it's a great Depeche Mode song. I think it's got short clipped vocals in it, so the vocal melodies are very short, very fast, very reminiscent of people like Ramones. If you played a Ramones 45 at 33, that it would probably sound like Wrong. Nights are Ebb, for example. Some hip hop. We've got very short vocals, and there's lots of words in those vocals. So when Dave sings about I've got the wrong face in the wrong place with the wrong ascendancy, something wrong with me, there's chemically, and you start to think about the tone and the intonation and the delivery of that. That's not traditional melody. It's more urban, dirty, fast, primitive. And part of the delivery of the song is deliberately designed to sound like a petulant teenager kicking a tin can walking down the road, tied next to a future retro sound. So for the recording of the album, Martin Gore had heavily taken into buying, cheap, or not necessarily cheap because he's got a lot of money, vintage synths off eBay. I think he bought 138, according to one of the making of documentaries. 138 synths that would be delivered to the studio, and then tinker around with them and try and get these weird and unique sounds, as opposed to using some of the more synthetic sounds in a box that you had on Exciter and to an extent on Playing the Angel, which made those albums sound more anonymous than they could have been. A vintage retro synth is very much the product of the slightly warped mind of a guy that would make synthesizers and design synthesizers for a living. And sometimes there's a handful of these which have been manufactured, so you're not going to be able to replicate that sound like vintage guitars or something. Wrong sounds and feels like an angry, sulky teenager telling you about their life, and it ties in with a concept that goes with it around, this retro sound that's also futuristic, kind of like going, well, actually, if we go back to, what life was like me, 14-year-old Dave Gahan in 1976 or thereabouts, you might go, actually, that's what Wrong is all about, this sulky child kind of moaning about their life. And there's an off-balance rhythm that goes to the song, so there's it sounds like the drum machine's a little bit broken. There's this kind of toy piano sound, very reminiscent of Little 15, which it sounds like someone's got a cheap toy piano, and it's slightly broken, like a music box or something. It's according to the notes which I've got over here, it's a vintage EMS VC3 through a Gibson amplifier. And the synth bass was played by Ben Hillier on that as well. And there was also an Akai MPC 1000 drum machine, whatever that means. So what you're using is a kind of vintage equipment. It's also got, I think, the vocal in here is very reminiscent actually of Master and Servant. The bit where he goes, it's a lot life. There's an element where there's almost like a duet between the two male voices that we have. Dave on the lead vocals, Martin kind of backing it up and answering the vocal lines that come from the original. The last thing that I will mention, the video for Wrong is very highly regarded. I don't quite know why, but what it is, it does remind me of, and it's only really occurred to me relatively recently with Sounds of the Universe, is Wrong is very reminiscent of, if you ever have a part in your life when you can't do right for doing wrong, no matter what you try and do, and you're trying to correct things and things, and you just end up making things worse. There's a wonderful German word for it. I can't remember what that name is, but the act of trying to fix something, you end up making it much worse. This is what Wrong is all about. That bit where you're working to try and save or change your life, or to make it perhaps more palatable and more enjoyable and generally less rubbish, and every effort that you make just doesn't work. It's a fascinating concept, one not enough songs detail in. Of course, 12th of April 2009 saw the release of the Ker-plunk cover, which was Depeche Mode's Sound of the Universe, the 12th studio album. Like previous studio albums, double vinyl, 13 songs in total, 12 plus a secret hidden track at the end, running about 59 minutes. Depeche Mode had a formula at this point, and they were going to be damned if they were going to break it. They had like a combination of modern blues and retro synths to create very glum pain and suffering in various tempos. And I think Sounds of the Universe is a really interesting kind of idea for it. As a title kind of explaining, well, this is what it sounds like to live in this universe. These are the experiences that we have living in this universe. And right from the opening sounds of the opening track, which feel a bit like Pansonic, it almost feels like if you listen to, or you turned perhaps the sound of the stars and you tuned into those on a radio, it would sound probably like the beginning minute of the opening track on the album, which is In Chains. In Chains is one of the very, very best Depeche Mode songs of all time, bar none. And I will fight you if you want to disagree with me. I won't fight you. I'll, let you have your opinion. But In Chains is absolutely one of the best Depeche Mode songs of recent years, an absolute classic. What we do have with Sounds of the Universe as a whole is a real change in the band's kind of sound, moving on from Ultra and to a greater extent Exciter, both of which had slightly flabby, slightly long arrangements that had very little variation and repetition in it. In Chains, Sounds of the Universe, it sounds a better album. It's tighter arrangements. There's less flab. There's less space in them. There's more quirkiness, more originality around it. There's more exploration of unique sounds that will have come only through those old vintage synths. There's not necessarily the sense of, oh, we need to make 50 minutes. Okay, well, this do, which is something which I very definitely got with Ultra, and to an extent, obviously, with Exciter as well. Is if you think about something like Free State and Insight on Ultra, and you think about perhaps pretty much most of Exciter, there was a sense of, well, we've booked a tour, we better do an album. Here's some songs. Maybe if we are they good enough? Yeah, right. We're gonna buy it whether the songs are good or not. So let's just play out any old shit. Was the impression I got. Certainly in huge chunks of Exciter. Sounds of the Universe didn't feel like that. It sounded like a band that had been a little bit revitalised. And the songs in there address some of the key questions which we had. The lyrics are more searching, they're more questioning, they're more like, well, who am I? Am I here? Who are you? What do we believe in? What comes after? What do I do? You know, the same questions which are also pushed inside the song Kingdom. And we had spacey melodies as well. So you think about perhaps some of the keyboard parts that are on the album. They've got this sense of almost exploring outer space, very reminiscent of the airy, light, almost simplistic, almost nursery rhyme melodies that you'll have had on the first 4 or 5 Kraftwerk albums. I'm thinking particularly side 2 of Autobahn, parts of Ralph and Florian, you know, where you've got these bright, simple, almost jinglistic, well, like advertising jingle type melodies, which are then kind of through repetition become actually very, very hooky and very, very memorable. The song, a couple of the songs on the album are very optimistic, very open, peace, perfect. I think what's the other one? Little Soul, for example. These are all songs that have an inherent optimism in them around the way that they approach the world, which you wouldn't normally associate with Depeche at all. I absolutely wouldn't. You wouldn't necessarily, what you'd expect to be is a repetition of what the band had done previously, which was basically bloody miserable stadium blues electronic rock. But you don't. Sounds of the Universe, I think, is a really good record. Actually, it's certainly better than a number of Depeche Mode albums. I'd probably put it about halfway in my ranking. And the live shows that went with the album, super. But we'll get to those shortly. It opens with In Chains. In Chains is a traditional sound of tension and release, one of the key things that you have in any Depeche Mode album. As the song number 4 on the album, Fragile Tension, indicates, it's the battle between realism and idealism, the battle between desire and unrequited lust, the battle between what you want and what you have. And In Chains almost very clearly kind of puts that lyric around, you know, spending your whole life in chains. It's the sound of a tense, coiled spring slowly unraveling before it snaps. In Chains, and it's one of the very best Depeche Mode songs. They opened every show on the 2009 and 2010 tours with In Chains, as they should, because In Chains is a fucking classic. Oops, sorry, I swore. Don't grass me up, please, Your Honour. Honestly, but it's absolutely great. Track 2 is Halter Feed, written by Dave, and Halter Feed is one of the more unpopular Depeche songs, primarily because I think people don't like it. Well, certainly the guy that runs the Almost Predictable blog doesn't like it, and a number of other fans don't. But Halter Feed is, in my opinion, a good, strong Depeche Mode song. Second song on almost every show of the tour, if not every show of the tour. It was the double A side of the final single that was released from the album. So here is Halter Feed and Fragile Tension, which came as a double 12-inch. And the way that this package was designed, by the way, was such so that you can put this side out, which is Fragile Tension, or you can put this side out, which is Halter Feed. Both had a barcode on, both had the spine on, so it's entirely up to you. I've put Halter Feed as the first track, primarily because I think Halter Feed is listed as the first track on the spine of the CD single, and it's the way that it's designed indicates that it could work both ways. So talk about the the typography and the layout for the Halter Feed and Fragile Tension single, what you look at is people generally read left to right and then top to bottom. So it's arranged in such a way so that you can look at that and you go very clearly, Fragile Tension is the single, and then Halter Feed is the second single of the A side. But when you look at the spine, it says Halter Feed stroke Fragile Tension on the way that faces out. On this one, it says Fragile Tension stroke Halter Feed. And when you look at the track order, there's Fragile Tension, then Halter Feed. So I guess Fragile Tension is the third single from the album, although it's a double A side. Although Fragile Tension was only played once, and Halter Feed was played 103 times. So which one are you going to do? The secret is to bang the rocks together, guys. But when you've got you've got the album, Fragile Tension is track, I think 6 or 5 or 4 or something, and Halter Feed is track 2, and Halter Feed was the one that was played more often. So I regard it as the A side. Now Halter Feed is the first Depeche Mode single alongside Peace to not have any member of the band in the video. Dave was diagnosed with an early form of cancer in the middle of the tour and took some very aggressive treatment, which resolved it completely. But what that did do is that meant that he was unavailable to be in the videos. So the video for Halter Feed and the video for Peace don't feature the band in there at all. But what you've got with Halter Feed is, I think it's a really good song, works well on stage, had this sense of tension and release. So you listen to it and you could feel, it wasn't like an AC/DC song that starts at 1,000 miles an hour and just keeps going balls out, bug nuts crazy, like, you know, Heat Seeker or something. It's a song that starts and stops, and the power and the tension comes from letting it simmer and then letting it go. So think about the Quentin Tarantino movies, especially something like Inglourious Basterds. The strength and the power of those films comes from knowing it's all going to kick off. The power comes from the waiting. And that's what happens in things like Fragile Tension and Halter Feed as well. The waiting is half the battle. Part of the glory is the agony of not having the glory yet. You know, this is I think probably an album that really kind of explores the human tendency to be negative, to be drawn to catastrophizing, to be drawn towards, you know, wanting bad things to happen, and at the same point kind of exploring what happens when actually the glory does really, really appear. Track 3 on the album is Wrong, which I've already discussed, and track 4 is Fragile Tension, which I kind of mentioned about 20,000 times in the past 3 minutes, it being the double A side of the third and final single from the album. Fragile Tension was only played live once by the band. When they swapped out In Sympathy, they moved into, I think, playing Peace and Fragile Tension, and then they decided to play that little-known song, Policy of Truth, which you may just have heard of, a single from another album instead. So that means that I feel that certainly the singles were underrepresented during the live shows. And again, it follows the Fragile Tension again follows that sense of tension and release, pull and push. Christian, the band's live drummer, does play on the album. He plays on the LP mix of Fragile Tension and I think he plays on a couple of other tracks as well. And then we have track 5, which is Little Soul. And Little Soul to me is like the other Martin Gore on the vocal on the standard version of the LP, is to be just another bloody Martin Gore song. It's a mid-paced ballad about how women are evil and terrible things happen, and there's probably a line in it about knees. But there's what we have in chunks of Sounds of the Universe, and this is the first time it's happened in the band's career, is a sense of no tangible musical progression between albums. Even something like Exciter or Playing the Angel was doing something new with the band's sound, moving it slightly forward. Sounds of the Universe is the last album where it felt to me where there was any progression whatsoever. From here on, much like Maiden, AC/DC, parts of Rush, you got the sense that in terms of musical exploration, they'd reached the cliff edge, and now they were exploring the sides of it as opposed to what would happen when they go over the other side of it. Track 6 is In Sympathy, which I think is an absolute classic. In Sympathy, only played somewhat staggeringly twice in the band's career, both in the first 2 dates of the tour in Luxembourg and Tel Aviv. And I think In Sympathy is fantastic. It's mid to fast paced. It's got this sense of exploring something through unfamiliarity. It's got a uniqueness of sounds which have been filtered and played. In some respects, it's very, very consistent, this album, and In Sympathy in particular, it's very consistent with the other stuff the band have done previously. People sometimes start to think about consistency as decline, and think about it being sameness and not exploring anything new, not going anywhere new with the sounds that you're making, which is, I think that's a fallacy of thinking, actually, because no one sits around when they listen to Thunderstruck and go, it's just the same as Heatseeker and Who Made Who. Everyone goes, bloody classic! Maybe not so much with Money Talks, but something like, Heatseeker. No one should listen to that by AC/DC and go, heard it all before. They just go, bloody brilliant song. I wish AC/DC would play it live more. Actually, I wish AC/DC would play live more. I only got to see them once, but that's a different discussion. And then we have track 7, which is Peace. Peace is side 3 of the LP, which means we're into double album territory. Peace is the second single that was released from the album. It was the first Depeche Mode single in a long time not to get a 12-inch release. It got a German coloured vinyl version, or as it describes on here, Platte in Mehlfarbigen vinyl. If you speak German, then you'll no doubt be horrified by my stupid Britlandish ways of describing it. But here is a marble 7-inch of Peace, which is numbered. This is number 1337, or if you want to turn it upside down, it's the elite version. And it's backed with the remix of the album track Comeback, remixed by John C. from Sigur Rós. Peace is a great little single. It's easily the most optimistic thing which Depeche Mode have released in absolutely chuffing bloody ages. It was released in June 2009. Again, following the Ker-plunk approach that we had for the LP. The single here, the 2-track CD, is backed with a 6-toes remix of Peace, and the other CD single has 6 alternate remixes of Peace, including ones by Sander Van Doorn, whoever they are, the Japanese pop stars, Sid LaRock, and the Just Us Conk Extended Disco Club vocal remix. There will be a test later on about all of this. Of course, there bloody won't. I don't even know why I said that. But no, Peace is a very adequate, suitable, serviceable Depeche Mode single. In no way is it amazing at all. But what we do have, track 8, is, I think, one of the very best Depeche tracks from this period. It is the B-side of Peace. It is called Comeback. And I think Comeback is to me, this is a song that was, I think it's a Christian, Andrew Philpott and Dave co-write. It's probably better without the words Depeche Mode on it, if that makes sense. Because if you listen to it and you didn't think it was a Depeche Mode track, you wouldn't then throw all the ideas that you would have around what makes Depeche Mode Depeche Mode. You just listen to it for what it is, and you go, that's really good. Now, you could imagine it's a very conventional, very traditional song in terms of its structure and approach. If Comeback had been an Oasis track, everyone would have been like, it's incredible that they're doing songs that good that late in their career. My God, I can't believe Oasis is doing a song as good as Comeback. It's, a kind of a Don't Go Away, Wonderwall kind of level ballad, actually. Absolutely brilliant song, but very underrated because it has the word Depeche Mode on the cover, and people bring to it their own ideas around what Depeche Mode is. And sometimes if you step outside of the box, people criticise and castigate you for it, in the way that The Mission did an album called Mask in 1992 that sounded nothing like The Mission. When AC/DC do something that's perhaps a little bit different, let's say Flick of the Switch, people start to go, oh, that's awful, because they bring with them all the prejudice and the ideas around what the band can and should and would do. And if the band dares step outside of the box, they're very bad indeed. Hence Moby's Animal Rights album, which I love and I don't think anybody else does at all. It's Comeback is a great track, actually. I absolutely love it to bits. I really, really do. And then we have Spacewalker, which is fucking forgettable. What the hell is it? It's a 2-minute ambient instrumental that sandwiches between two songs. Were it on an album in 1987, it wouldn't have a title, it would just appear there. But because in the days when they feel like they had to present big packages of information and work and say, this album's got 13 songs on it. Forget that one of the songs is 2 minutes long and shouldn't have a title. It's got 13 songs on it. Oh, I better put down the 10 quid for it from a supermarket. And then, of course, we've got Perfect, which is track 10, which I think was a potential single. Has one of the very worst couplets in any Depeche Mode song ever. And by the way, considering we have People Are People, and why should it be that we should get along so awfully? And also, every time I look at a photograph of you, it makes me feel blue. There is the line in Perfect where he goes, I didn't shoot, I didn't pull the trigger, it wasn't me, I'm just a plain and simple singer. And I'm like, you're writing a song about writing a song now. That's not very good. It's very difficult for me as somebody that listens to Depeche Mode to think, I am a plain and simple singer. No, I'm not. I'm just a dude that doesn't sing. So it's very difficult for me to get to identify with that lyric. And that makes Perfect perhaps a less good song than it had been. But then we do have side 4, the last side of the album. We have a track called Miles Away, brackets The Truth Is. The reason it's not called Miles Away on its own is because there was a Madonna song of the same name, which was released very shortly before that. I think Miles Away is a really great song. Again, written by Dave and Andrew and Christian. It's built on a guitar riff, which had been penned by Martin, which was added to the song towards the end. And that is almost like the central underpointing part of the rest of the song. It's about man exploring in a space. It's about, for example, if you're having a conversation with somebody and you can tell that that person's not there, they're somewhere else, they're exploring something else, it's about you're miles away. And there's an element of going, well, that could be about, for example, talking to somebody that's a junkie and then they're starting to feel like they need their fix and then they're starting to think like that. And then you kind of go, the truth is, you're miles away, you're not here. Always reminds me of the line from Apocalypse Now when they thought that the reality they didn't like. It says, I'm not here, I'm on a beach in Honolulu, Martin. I'm not here, this is not me, this is not really happening. Much like the song How to Disappear Completely and Never Be Found by Radiohead. Then we have the penultimate track on the album is Jezebel. That's yet another Martin vocal. That's shit. And then we have the last track on the album, which I think is one of the very best Depeche Mode tracks, one of the later period classics, which is Corrupt. I think Corrupt is phenomenal. Why it's the last track on the album, I don't know. I'd have made it track 3 on the LP. Staggeringly, Corrupt was only played live in 2017 and for a small part in 2018. It wasn't played on the Sounds of the Universe tour. It's bloody brilliant. It's misplaced, although I do think when you listen to Corrupt, if the band were playing live, you could play Should Be Higher and Corrupt inside each other as a medley. The song's tempos, keys and parts would work identically with each other. But it was only played in 2017, and I think the structure of the song and the arrangement is ideal, and it's got this dirty, fuzzy bass and guitar line, which is just, it's absolutely gorgeous. And Corrupt just does not get anywhere near enough love, so I'm going to have to hug it, cuddle it, treasure and cherish it forever. The super deluxe version of the album, which I've barely touched upon so far, but I should do, is where the next set of tracks from the album come from. So the album was put technically formatted to fuck. The super deluxe edition of it, which is now deleted and out of print, is absolutely definitely the version to go for. This is the definitive edition with 4 discs in, 2 books, God knows what else. Let's go and do an unboxing. You've waited half an hour, you've earned it. First and foremost, the Ker-plunk cover on there. But also, I really like this little trick on here. And this was £65 it was released. You can really think, I'm getting my £65 worth here. So your first step is you take the very hefty weighted box thingy off. Oh dear, just mind it won't come off unless I need to use both hands. And then you look a little further in it, and the first thing that you get is the book. So you get the Words and Images of the Universe by Anton Corbijn and Depeche Mode. And so open that. Let's see what that does for you. Here's a hardback book that's got, absolutely typically lots of lovely pictures of band members during the recording and taken by Anton Corbijn, standing moodily in front of objects and things. Now this picture here, I think this picture should be the LP cover. It's certainly better than the the Ker-plunk cover, which I've disparagingly referred to a number of times. And there's the guitar that later appears, I think, in the video for Heaven, actually. And there's three moody guys in leather, three moody guys standing in front of some architecture, or in this case, it's a massive sculpture that I think was set up for the World's Fair. That's an observatory. The idea being, much like Depeche Mode album covers actually, is that you've got the band or people standing in places where it looks like they don't necessarily belong. But it's a lovely little bit of artwork actually, that photo, and I wish it was more appropriately used. And again, there's more photographs of the guys. Carrier bag, which I won't mention. Certificate of authenticity, not signed. There's a postcard pack here where you have 5 postcards out of a potential set of 17. I've never opened this. I wish they'd stuck all 17 in, considering the price that they charge you. There's a book called Making the Universe, which, oh look, colours. Again, studio photographs taken during the making of the album. Really lovely box set, by the way, but probably quite expensive to get now, I would have thought. Let's put that there. Then you get a fold-out poster-me thing, not too exciting. Then you get, what else do you get? You get a little book called The Making of the Universe, which is photography by Ben Hillier, which folds out. It's very small, this one. Pamphlet, I think, is the technical term for it, where you can get to see what the studio looks like. Then you've got another little pamphlet which tells you what else is happening in there. You get a couple of badges. Oh, we don't need your stinking badges. And here's the stuff you've really paid for, your CDs. So you've got your Sounds of the Universe CD there. Your second CD, which has got 5 new studio tracks on, called Light, the Sun, the Moon and the Stars, which is sung by Martin. The Sun, the Moon and the Stars should very, very definitely have been on the LP, as indeed Light and Sun, the Moon and the Stars should have been on the album instead of some of the less exciting songs that you've got on the album. You've got Oh Well, which is obviously, it appears in its B-side form, which is a Dave and Martin co-write. You've got Esk, which is bleh. And then you've got a track called Ghost, which is okay, but it's not amazing either. And then you've got some remixes of Corrupt, In Chains, Little Soul, Jezebel, Perfect, and Wrong. CD3, this is really interesting, CD3. This is demo versions recorded by Martin. So you've got demos of Little 15, Clean, Sweetest Perfection, Walking in My Shoes, I Feel You, Judas, Surrender, Only When I Lose Myself, Nothing's Impossible, and then Corrupt, Peace, Jezebel, Come Back, and In Chains from the Sounds of the Universe album. And you've got a DVD, and the DVD has a 5.1 mix of the album and the bonus tracks, I think. And then you've got 2 documentaries which come to 2 hours, and four songs recorded in the studio. Those 4 songs being Corrupt, Little Soul, Stories of Old, and Come Back. And I think Corrupt, Little Soul, and Stories of Old weren't played on the tour, as alongside the video for Wrong. So yeah, there you have it. It's a really good little package, this box set. I really, really rate it. I think it's very well packaged. I think in total it comes to something like 59 songs or some ridiculous figure like that, but it's very well put together. The band went on tour, and they did their tour of the universe, which lasted for, what do you think now? I have to calculate this. I think it's 103 shows, possibly 102 shows actually. And it started in Tel Aviv, in Luxembourg, the first official show from the tour, May 10th, 2009, and the band released 48 live albums from this tour. This is the first show that was released on the 10th of May, which features, they brought back into the set list after a long break, It's No Good, Fly on the Windscreen, Master and Servant, Strange Love, Waiting for the Night. Master and Servant and Strange Love didn't last long at all, which is a great shame because the band cancelled some shows because Dave had cancer. Those shows were then rescheduled to January and February 2010, I saw 2 of the shows at that period. But what that means is, because they dropped Master and Servant and Strangelove, the last time I saw Depeche Mode playing Master and Servant and Strangelove live was 1990. It feels a very, very long time ago. So I'm mildly irked by that, I think it's fair to say. Obviously the band released a number of singles. The last single was released in December, which is Fragile Tension and Hold to Feed. The CD single of this features remixes of Perfect on as well. And then we had the last 2 shows. The last 2 shows I went to with the tour, which I'll mention shortly, because the home video release was filmed in Barcelona in November. It came out as a Blu-ray, the first Depeche Mode Blu-ray, and then as a 4-disc set featuring a load of documentaries, some screens and 2 audio CDs of Depeche Mode live in Barcelona. This is really good. It's also on YouTube, so you don't have to worry too much about whether you can afford it, find it, or whether your Blu-ray plays anymore. Mine doesn't, thanks to dreaded disc rot and oxidization. I saw 2 shows on this tour. I saw the February the 20th show at the London O2 Arena, and I saw the legendary show at the Royal Albert Hall on the 17th of February 2010, where the band had a string section, and they brought back photographic, but they also did a one-off performance with Alan Wilder rejoining the band to perform Somebody live at the Royal Albert Hall, and that was an incredible moment to see. Absolutely unique, a great show, one for the history books. So glad that I got to see it. I'd have been so annoyed if I hadn't been there. I really, really would have. And that is the end of the Sounds of the Universe and Tour of the Universe era. It feels like I've raced through it, and at the same point it feels like I've really gone into depth in this album. I think this is a really good period for the band. It has been overlooked because it's just another Depeche Mode album. It's just another Depeche Mode period. It's just another Depeche Mode tour. But it's a really solid, good period of the band's history, and one that I think history will look at far better and far kinder than perhaps some of the other ones. So that wraps it up. Like, subscribe, say nice things in the comments. I'll post links to the live shows. Take care of yourselves and each other, and stay beautiful. I will see you again at some point, hopefully soon, for another episode of the never-ending series of Mark talking about every record he ever owned, ever. Thank you very much, and as Gahan would always say, we'll see you next time. Good night, YouTube. Ta-ra. I can't think of a witty way of ending it, so I'm just going to press a button and hang up. Thanks everyone for making it to the end, and see you soon. Bye.